What is up, guys, and welcome to the theScore eSports podcast. I am, of course, your host, Colin McNeil. We've got a bit of a skeleton crew today. With me in the booth is Daniel Rosen.
Hi, guys.
And an empty chair. Josh Burry is off sick today, so it's just going to be you and me, Dan.
I'm cut to the empty chair just so they can know how empty it really is.
Oh, we should have put like a hat there or something. Now, I'm pretty excited today because we have been talking a lot about League of Legends because of the news going on in that scene, but today we are getting back to something near and dear to my heart, which is good old Counter-Strike. Now, who do we have on to talk about that? Pretty unique guest. We've had a lot of casters on this show. We've had some players as well. But today we have our very first observer. If you don't know what an observer is, it's when you watch Counter-Strike, that's the person who decides what point of view you see. It's basically the person who makes professional Counter-Strike actually consumable as an entertainment piece. We've got none other than Heather Garozzo. You probably know her better as sapphiRe, arguably the world's foremost observer in the esport of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, she's got a lot more on her plate, too. She's manager of Team Dignitas, I believe, female CSGO team. She is some kind of Twitch affiliate because, man, she is always giving away free Twitch stuff, which is pretty cool. And there's probably like 10 other things. I can hear her laughing in the background, so we might as well get her to clarify that. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, I'm all sorts of things. I'm always keeping myself busy in esports, whether it's I do a lot of streaming and I go to a lot of events as an observer, so I pick up things to give away for free. I manage Team Dignitas' female Counter-Strike team, and I'm also the director of marketing for Team Dignitas.
Okay. Anything else that we're forgetting?
I think that's it for now. Yeah.
That's fair. Because I always see you on Twitter, like it's always like, I'm giving away this Twitch water bottle. I'm giving away this and that, the other thing.
Oh my gosh, I get so much stuff at events. You know, I don't need it all, so I'd rather give it to people that haven't been to events.
That's fair. I can see some of your event swag in the background there, actually.
Yeah, I've collected a lot of lanyards in my life, and a few big checks, which is nice too when I was competing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
You always think the big checks are just a thing in cartoons, but it's always funny that they are actually real and they are actually that just sort of like neat to look at.
I mean,
yeah. When they handed it to me, I'm like, well, how do I bring this home on the plane across the world? That's always a funny story to tell the flight attendant.
Yeah, seriously, I don't think that counts as carry-on. That's pretty big.
No, you usually, you got to kind of work a deal with them to put it behind like the last first class seat.
Now, speaking of events, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you were the observer or one of the observers for the ESL Pro League Finals this past weekend, as of this recording.
I actually was not at Pro League Finals.
Oh, you weren't?
This is the first one I've missed in a long time. They had some local observers that they used in Copenhagen since they produced this season out of Copenhagen. So they used them. No worries. I'll be back with ESL early January. So I've got a lot of things with them.
Oh, man, that sucks because I wanted to ask you finally, how do I pronounce Odense or Odense or whatever it is?
Yeah, we've been struggling with it because I did most of the online season for Pro League. So I always hear the commercials. We always hear the host Stunna try it. I think it's Odense, something like that. Hopefully no one from Denmark is listening to me.
I saw Anders on Twitter try to pronounce it, and there was a lot of tongue action involved and a lot of lisping. It was very complicated, and I don't want to try to replicate it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try it with him.
That's fair enough. So the one of the things I wanted to start off talking to you about, Heather, was observing. So as I said in the intro, you are arguably the best observer in Counter-Strike. I know when I first became aware of the observer role, it was you were the name who was coming up. And it seems like every time I check a big event, which is probably why I assumed you were doing ESL Finals, you are on the docket as one of or the observers. How did you come into that role?
Well, kind of like you, I had no idea what an observer even was for a few until a few years back. I've been involved in Counter-Strike since 1999, and I have a very good relationship with ESL. I've known Craig Levine, who I don't know his title, but he's right up there in terms of number 1 or number 2 at ESL. He used to manage my husband's team, Team 3D. So I've known him for well over a decade, and he's always looked after me. So because of that, I have a good relationship with ESL. And one day, Derek Trung, who I believe he manages Energy now, he was a professional player, he said, hey, Heather, we could use an observer for this was the ESL1 Cologne qualifiers 2015. I said, do you need a what? What is an observer? And he's like, yeah, the person that clicks around in the game. And I never thought about that before. As much as I've been involved in Counter-Strike, I never thought that, yeah, there's actually someone there guiding the action. So I was like, why not? I gave it a shot. I brought my husband Volcano with me, and I said, hey, let's just try this out together and figure this out. And I had watched a lot of demos because I was an analyst for ESEA News. And I realized eventually, I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense. It's just like demo watching. I want to see the most important information that happens in a round. So went pretty well with ESL, and then they kind of hired me event after event. And obviously ESL is one of if not the biggest event organizer, so being on the talent broadcast ticket for that certainly helped grow some of my popularity. And then because of that, I was able to meet other people from MLG and E-League, and I recently did Blast Pro Series. I've done a lot of smaller events as well. So I built a great relationship with a lot of the tournament organizers that gets me those invites event after event.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, which is, I guess, what is your sort of employment arrangement with some of these TOs? Do you work on contract per event, or do you have sort of like maybe a year, 6 months, something like that?
It's per event, and I chose that because I do work a full-time job at Team Dignitas, and I was previously in marketing at an insurance company. I just wanted that flexibility. I didn't want to necessarily be tied to one tournament organizer or a large commitment, even though I pretty much travel every weekend, but I do it by choice. I pick up each event that I like. I worry that there might be a time where tournament organizers do want to lock in observers and keep them full time. But so far, everyone I've worked with has allowed me the flexibility to work multiple events, and I really appreciate that.
That's fair enough. So I wonder if you could speak to how important the role of observer is to the viewer in terms of pro Counter-Strike. Because I think anyone who's watched a lot of it, maybe doesn't dawn on them immediately, but the second you think like, oh shit, there's actually someone deciding what I watch, you're like, wow, this could go from entertaining to unwatchable real quick.
Exactly. Essentially, I don't want the viewer to know I'm even there. You want it to feel very seamless. You want it to feel almost automated to a point. You don't want it to feel a little janky. You don't want the switches to happen too quickly, because it's going to be very distracting to the viewer. You want to tell a story. You want to show the most important information in the round, and you are working with the casters. It's a two-way street. The casters are talking over what we show to them, but sometimes they have their own computers, and you can tell they're suggesting that we switch to something. So it's very important that if I go on Reddit and no one says anything about the observing, I know that I've done my job for the day. I'm shocked when we get compliments about observing, because it's not something you really think about until it goes wrong. So if there's no comments, I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. If you're doing your job well, no one's going to say anything. I'm glad you actually brought up that thing about switching too fast, because whenever I try and show a friend of mine who doesn't know about Counter-Strike or has never really watched any kind of esport before, the number one complaint I'm getting is they're switching too fast. What player is this? What player is that? So I'm happy to hear that that's a front and center concern of yours.
And I especially learned that with E-League, because thinking about the audience for E-League, you might get a lot of new viewers that have not seen Counter-Strike before or haven't seen any type of professional gaming. So because of E-League, I started to introduce more third-person points of view, and then we call them LERPs. So essentially, and that's the name in Counter-Strike, is going from point A to point B in like a slow, smooth movement. So we've added things like that to give context to the fight. So if we see that, say on Mirage, the T's are going into kind of a smoke setup, we're going to show their lineups, and then oftentimes you want the viewer to learn something too. So if I see a new smoke, I'm going to kind of follow that and show the players lineup so the viewer can learn it as well. And then I'll do a third person overview of the A site to see how the CTs react to that, where the smokes land. And then as soon as a frag or shooting is about to happen, then I switch into the first person point of view.
That's fascinating, because I love the idea of bringing people in with the observing and being that sort of invisible hand. But I have to wonder, because that's something you see a lot, right? Like with like movie editors, right? No, that's a thing they say a lot, where it's like, if somebody thinks about my job, then I've done my job wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, on a personal level, how does it feel to be somebody who is essentially, like you said, the invisible hand? Like, you don't necessarily, obviously you're the name that comes up if you know about this thing, but most people don't necessarily. How does it feel to essentially be a ghost involved in this process?
At first, I felt I was working so hard and no one's acknowledging it. I'm like, am I doing something wrong? Why isn't everyone saying, hey, that was some great observing? That was my first reaction. But as I thought about it again, I'm like, oh no, this is my job. I'm supposed to be a ghost. But because I have a marketing background and marketing PR, I try to do a lot of things outside of physically observing. So, I have the opportunity to go to these events. I spend time with the players, with the talent, with production. I get to go behind the scenes. Essentially, my pass is usually an all-access pass. So I try to do additional things to add value as an observer while not actually observing. And that kind of gets my name out there. Not that I necessarily want the attention. I just, I like doing this, so I want to get more and more work. And it's hard to do when you're an observer because you're kind of faceless. So I try to add a lot of value outside of just physically observing.
And I think that's definitely notable in what you mentioned there of trying to get kind of help people understand what the game is like. I guess I'm wondering, how was that something you kind of realized and developed for eLeague, or is that something you had been working on for a while?
I had thought about it for a while. I was around during the disaster that was CGS, and that was all watched in third person point of view. And I couldn't stand it. No one could, because you couldn't necessarily see the skill of the player. And I thought, well, now I'm in control. I want to show first person. I want to show all these really sick flicks and no scopes. But then I realized, thinking a couple months down the road as eLeague approached, and thinking outside the audiences, that's people like me. I watch tens of thousands of hours of Counter-Strike, and I know how to watch it, but not everyone has that experience. So eLeague kind of forced me to think about that more. But now I incorporate it in a lot of our events because we are seeing a lot of new fans to the game.
So you seem pretty sought after, I would say, in your particular role. Do you feel, when it comes to TOs anyway, that you are as valued as the on-camera talent?
I think so. They treat me quite well. I get the same treatment as the talent, as the players, put in a nice hotel, get access to the green room. Even silly things like the welcome gifts make me feel special. You get a nice bag, and that's probably why I have all this stuff that I keep giving away, because get a bag and phone chargers and towels and t-shirts, all that. I have felt really welcomed by the tournament organizers, and I think that's why they welcome me back too, because not only is my observing pretty good, but I work well with the production, because you need to have communication with the director, the producer, the replay operator, even the game admins sometimes. I'm old now. I've had a lot of life experiences in the real working world, so I think I really work well with production.
That's definitely important. Do you work solo usually, or are there observing duos? Because we talk a lot about caster duos, right? Like how important that is. But Is it the same in observing?
Yeah, there are duos and even trios, actually. So I primarily work with Prius. So he and I have worked together for about a year and a half now. It kind of depends on what the tournament organizer asks for. So some events, for example, I'll be the primary observer and I'll observe all of the live action for the entire map. And then let's say Prius is the delay observer, and we switch off these roles to give each other breaks. But the delay observer is essentially looking at the kill feed and putting together interesting clips. So if Nico gets 3 Deagle kills and I only had 2 on the main camera, he'll clip those 3 together for the replay, or vice versa. I might do that role. So that's how we might work together there. But there's also other tournament organizers. For example, we did this at one of the E-League seasons where we had 2 live observers and then an in-game director that is switching between the 2. So I might be all first person and Prius might be all third person, and he's setting up those shots. And then there's an in-game director that switches which view goes out to the stream. Sometimes we even have trio where we have the delay observer and then the third person and the first person. So it kind of depends on what the tournament organizer is looking for. Sometimes even what their budget is. They may only want to hire 2 or so observers, but I'd say Prius and I work almost every single event together, and we are treated like a duo because we have such great chemistry together. We know our styles. We even know when each other kind of needs a break, or I am up early, so I always do the morning shift, which works well, and he stays up late, so he does the later games and things like that.
I'm curious. Obviously, you're a professional player, but I'm wondering how much game knowledge is necessary to be an observer, right? You need to know kind of when things are going to happen and how they're going to happen, but how much do you have to know, and I guess how much more do you have to know than say somebody else who would be looking to do something similar?
So you don't have to have let's say pro league level knowledge to be an observer, just like these different levels of casters too. They have different depths of knowledge. So to be an observer, you really need to understand the map and how the 2 dots on the radar work when blue and yellow are going to meet each other. If you can do that, you can observe. However, to be a great observer, there's so much more depth to it. You have to understand when, who you want to put a camera on in a 2v2. When there's 5 terrorists coming into the site, which one's going to get the entry kill? That's really hard to tell when there's 3 different dots grouped together. So it's really important to understand player roles. Because I've studied these players now for several years, I know a lot of their habits, and I can better predict their action instead of guessing which of these 3 yellow dots is going to face first, when it's really just millimeters difference. A millimeter left or right can change their line of sight. So it's good to understand the players, understand their strategies. You want to even understand the casters and their preferences, whether they like to see a lot of those setup shots, whether something like a flank is more interesting to them than an entry kill. So having a good relationship with the casters is also important, and that's hard to build up. So there's definitely more to it than just looking at dots on the radar, but that's the basis of it. That's how you can at least get started.
I did not think about the caster relationship, but now that you mention it, it does make sense.
Our job their job relies on us.
Yes.
They do not control the camera. So if we are jumping around too much, that's very hectic for them.
A while back, you mentioned Nico just in his example. Do you have like favorite players or perhaps a favorite team that you like to observe for whatever reason?
I do. SK is probably one of the most fun. I love being able to observe Fallen when he's opping. He's so aggressive. So I love it when he's on Mirage. He's playing CT side. He pushes really close to the A ramp. And you're not supposed to push that close with an op. And he's just no scope, 3 or 4 guys. And it's just it's so nuts. And you are so tempted to switch the camera to maybe there's a T jumping out of the apartments, and no one should be able to turn around with a op and kill him that fast, but Fallen can, and Fallen does. So you don't want to make the mistake of switching off of him, because then it kind of you see the kill but not from his point of view. So that's really fun. Fur is fun because he is just everywhere he shouldn't be? And so bringing up third-person points of view or bringing up the map and hearing the casters or the audience laugh, like, why is he right there right now? He always gets behind enemy lines, which is great. And then Coldzera just, he makes the impossible possible, and he's really fun to observe when he's clutching.
Fair enough. SK, not a bad answer for who you like to watch. Any love for NA? Who's the best NA team to observe?
Cloud9.
Yes.
Cloud9 is so fun.
Yes.
Those guys just do crazy things too. Stewie and Automatic. I don't know how they pull off the things they do, but they have great clutch rounds that are really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, talk about guys who do stuff that they're not, quote unquote, supposed to. There's a couple guys on that team who fall into that category for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, it seems like at this point, you, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you kind of like walk into an event. You're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know this like the back of my hand. I know all the players. I know all the teams. But what is your prep like? And has that changed over the years?
It has definitely changed over the years. I used to do a lot of studying of my demos after events to see what I could have improved there, and I take notes. I spent months and months and months setting up my camera binds too. So I'd study the demos and I'd look at what I had for a camera. Did I have a third-person camera? If I didn't, what should I have done there? So essentially, I have almost every single key on the keyboard bound to different camera angles and for every single map. So that took me a long time to set up, and I kept adjusting it based on caster feedback, fan feedback, how I thought it actually played out. I don't do that as much anymore. I don't do a lot of prep work anymore, just because I do this every single weekend. It's kind of like the teams. They don't necessarily have time to practice anymore because they're at event after event. But observing for me now has become, it's almost zen-like. I put on my headset and I'm just in the zone. And, I always had the requirement with production. If I'm the main observer, I turn off every single audio line to me except the casters. That's the only thing I want to hear, and I just want to 100% focus on them. And I also like to hear the crowd reaction too, because then they kind of help tell that story that you're showing them. So I don't have to do as much prep anymore. There is kind of more of a technical prep when I get to events. So how many monitors I have, keyboards, mouse pads, making sure all my settings are correct, because we're switching between a lot of different computers and you don't want the audience necessarily to know that. So you want to make sure every single computer looks identical. So there's a bit of a technical setup, but in terms of preparing to observe, I've kind of gotten to a place where it's very routine for me.
That makes total sense. Now, on the subject of casters, do you have a favorite caster duo that you like to work with?
Oh gosh, no, I probably shouldn't say. I don't want to. I love working with them all. No, I really do though. They are great, and they each of them have just a tiny bit of a different style, and even things like wanting to see the scoreboard more and the money more, that varies between the casters. So I like working with different groups all the time. It's nice to have different change.
Fair enough. Now, to anyone listening out there who's like, hey, I want to be an observer, I could do this, what advice would you have for them?
So there are hundreds and hundreds of games of Counter-Strike every single week that go unstreamed. Look at ESCA, Faceit, CEVO. There's qualifiers for ESL and DreamHack and E-League that no one ever broadcasts. And when I have time, I try to stream some of those, but I'm only one streamer. I can't possibly get to all of them. So that's a great place to start. And it's a great place to build yourself up as a streamer too. You immediately have an audience if you pick the right matches. People want to watch these games and no one's broadcasting them. Open up ESEA, turn on your stream and start streaming some matches. And what you can even do is, Auto Director is not bad when it's on a 2-minute delay because it finds a lot of the kills. So when in panic and you still want to provide a good stream for your audience, throw on Auto Director, think about why it did that, try to study those demos. So that's a great way to kind of build up your resume. And just like there's aspiring observers, there's also aspiring casters. So
Yeah.
find someone that wants to become a better caster, because casting and observing is incredibly difficult. I've tried it and I'd never wish it upon anyone. It's really hard to focus on both and do a good job. So find a pair, make a duo with another caster, and that's a great way to get started doing some online matches. TOs really want to see that you have documented experience before they hire you. They're not going to take a gamble on someone that they haven't heard from. So that's a great way to build up your resume.
No, that makes total sense, honestly. I wanted to just move on a bit and talk about the female CSGO scene, because you are, correct me if I'm wrong, the manager of Dignitas women's CSGO team.
I am, yes.
Now, you guys just had a personnel change a little while back, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. We brought in a player named Milk.
Yes.
So she had previously played for CLG Red at one of the IM Katowicas. And we had Kath for a while, and we had done pretty well in some events. We just wanted kind of that next step, and we thought we'd try something fresh. There's almost no one that has as much experience as Kath, and she's a great player. But the girls just wanted to try something a little new, because we did well in some female tournaments, but to us, that's merely a stepping stone. They are far more interested in moving up the ESCA league ladder, qualifying for major events like DreamHack, ESLs, etc. So we thought that might be the next step for us to get better as a team.
Okay, I totally remember that now, because I remember I wrote the headline, Dignitas got milk. I wrote that.
I love it. I saw that one. I thought it was great.
Yes, yes. Okay, anytime I can write a pun headline where it's appropriate, I will totally do so. So I wonder if you would be able to talk to me a little bit about, in a very general sort of like zoomed out sense, the female CSGO scene, because it's actually something that I have been interested in a while, and I'm trying to get more into, and I find it difficult to immerse myself in. I find it difficult to find the events to watch, at least before they actually happen, and follow the scene.
It is difficult, and because there are not many competitive female players, at least in North America. In Europe, it seems to be far more thriving. In North America, there was just the WESG qualifier a couple weeks ago. There's $100,000 on the line. There is almost guaranteed. You don't even have to win a match to get to the LAN qualifier. 5 teams would have gone to the LAN qualifier. Only 3 registered. So everyone, they played the matches just for seeding, but even with that amount of money at stake, there were not teams that formed. Certainly, there are more females playing Counter-Strike than there were years ago. I used to be the only female in the room. I'd never run into another female on ESCA, something like that. There's definitely far more, but they don't necessarily seem to be as interested in competitive play. I wonder if that is, there's an intimidation factor. It's difficult out there. A lot of people get harassed, not just females.
Yeah.
But I'm sensitive too. I've become immune to it over the years. But people are really cruel, and sometimes you feel like you don't belong there, and it's really hard to find people you relate to too. You don't know where to even find other female players. So I think that's part of the reason there's just not a lot that are interested in competitive yet. I hope that changes, because that's where I find the most interest in this game. I wouldn't be still around if I was just playing like casual matchmaking. I really care about matches, competition.
Where would you say right now, at the end of 2017, the skill level is when it comes to women's CS:GO versus men's CS:GO?
I struggle with that question because, the better players in the world are men, and but I can't compare SK to Team Dignitas Female and CLG Red, because you can't compare SK to thousands and thousands of other teams. Yeah, like I'm just thinking about Team Dignitas and CLG Red because those are the best two in North America and some of the best in the world. There's a lot of teams that are better than us, a lot, but there's also a lot, thousands that are worse than us too. So it's hard to compare, female to male, because there's so much variation within a gender too. You know, Team Dignitas and CLG Red are the best female players in North America, but they don't represent the entire female population, because there are some that are, they're just far, far lower skilled as well. But then there are probably like a handful of females too from these teams that could play on better teams as well. They could maybe make it to, premier level teams or lower invite level teams, even looking like I played on some seasons of invite. Miss Harvey played on seasons of invite. So, there's females that could kind of stand out. They play together on female teams, at least I believe, because you spend 60 hours a week together. You travel together. You got to sleep in hotels together. You just want to be around people that kind of you feel comfortable with. So that's why sometimes a lot of females kind of group together instead of one kind of soloing and going to play in Premier or something like that.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I was going to ask you. Sometimes you see, I don't know, a Reddit thread or something pop up saying, this women's CS:GO player, she could play on this team, she could play on that team, she's good enough for that. Why isn't she leaving? So I am glad you addressed that, and it does make logical sense from sort of like a common sense point of view that you'd want to stick together like that. Now, you mentioned a little while ago harassment, or sort of like, you didn't use this word, but toxicity. Like where, and we've all seen it. Obviously, I don't have any kind of point of reference for what a woman playing professionally in CS:GO might have to deal with, but even I see Reddit threads, I see tweets and things like that. Like, where do you think this comes from?
It's kind of it's just the internet in general. People are so cruel. Like, even on I follow Sports Center on Twitter. Anytime a woman athlete is mentioned, there's tweets like, "Get back to the kitchen. You don't belong." I read an article a couple months ago about like the highest scoring NCAA female basketball player, and the comments were just disgusting. She's one of the most accomplished female basketball players in her division or whatever, and the comments were just terrible. So I don't think it's ever gonna go away. It's been going on for years and years and years. I do think more people are accepting of women playing games than they used to be. It used to be very against social norms. Like I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, but I was also playing gaming on the side, and there was no way I would tell anyone that. It was so embarrassing to tell people that I was going to play Counter-Strike on the weekend. I think that's more accepting now. People think it's cool. I tell my high school friends now all the time, like, yeah, I just got back from tournament in Paris. No big deal. They're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. So social norms are changing. I don't think it's ever going to get better. I do know that, a lot of females have got a lot of harassment online, but when we go to a LAN tournament, people are actually really pleasant and they're cheering us on. And it's funny that it never necessarily comes from the higher divisions. The professional players and the semi-professional players, they are so nice. A lot of them will stand behind, cheer us. They'll have flags. They'll have high-five us after an event. A lot of them are really good guys. It's kind of those players that aren't necessarily coming to the events or not necessarily competing with you on a day-to-day basis that are giving you the most trouble.
Yeah, I think one of the things that bugs me the most is when I see this kind of narrative where there'll be a clip, say, posted, and it'll be like, a clip where someone screws up. There was one a while ago where like somebody wanted to drop a smoke and they dropped a molly on themselves and killed themselves, right? And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, female CSGO. And it's like, but when fail highlights are posted and it's a guy, it doesn't say, oh, male CSGO, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
that kind of
Oh,
kills me.
that drives me nuts because the guys I'm super generalizing, but they
Yeah.
make mistakes too, and yeah, that's probably a lower skill female possibly. Doesn't necessarily represent all females, just like a fail from a male. So people just, I don't know, they always find a reason to get upset over things. It used to bother me. I know one time that people are just, I don't know, something that someone said was just awfully mean, and I got to the point where I went on Twitter. I'm like, this is not fair. Why are people saying this to me? I'm generally a pretty chill, nice person. I don't fight with anyone. I don't even curse at people. I'm the most chill person you'll probably meet. And people were attacking me, and I was upset. But then I couldn't tell you. There's 15 or 20 pros from teams like iBuyPower, NIP, just really respected players that said, hey, but yeah, that happened to you, Heather, but this happened to me. And then, other players said, this happened to me, and blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
wow.
So, they get attacked too. And it kind of made me feel better. Not that I want them to be attacked, but I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not necessarily the only target. It's just people that happen to be in the spotlight are going to naturally be attacked on the internet by someone that's nameless.
Yeah, totally. Where would you say that you would like to see the scene go in terms of women's Counter-Strike? Like, where ideally is it going to move for you in the next 5 years? God, if we're still playing Counter-Strike, 10 years.
I'd love to see certainly more interest in competition rather than competitive play. I think that's what keeps this game going, is being able to compete, play in matches. So I definitely want to see more women play in competition, whether they're in female teams or mixed teams. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It makes no difference where they're competing. I would love to see more women, whether on women's teams or mixed teams, playing in these open qualifiers. There's these events happening every single month for DreamHack, ESL, and even the female events like WESG and ESWC. Why aren't females trying to play in these? It's a great chance to improve. You're only going to get better if you play against better people. So I would love to see more participation by women in open qualifiers.
Okay, so talking about participation, recently on Twitter, actually, I think it was about exactly 24 hours now, about you voiced your opinion about the idea of women's only leagues. You said, if I can quote you here, there have been many in the past. They're always a nightmare to deal with. Have to do voice checks the entire game. Every single time it's been attempted, there have been boyfriends/males caught playing for females. Most female teams decline them now. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so this was specifically in regards to online female tournaments. My teammates and I, and not just this current team, teams in the past, we just can't stand those qualifiers because you don't trust who you're playing with. You don't know that someone's boyfriend isn't playing. It's just a really hard thing to admin and make sure that it's fair. I don't see a ton of value in female online leagues. When they've happened in the past, honestly, it seemed like there's just a lot of drama around it. It didn't seem like necessarily something that inspired other women to make teams. It was more just like, I'm only playing because I want to beat her ass, and that's it. And every time it's been attempted, it's just fallen apart. I like the amount of female events that there are now. I don't necessarily want to see more because, again, I think if you want to be the best, you need to play against the best. I do like that there's a handful of female tournaments every couple months because they are a great way to put women in the spotlight for those other women that say, hey, I don't see anyone that looks like me, acts like me. Oh, okay, now I'm watching ESWC. Now I can there's people that I kind of relate to there. So it's a great kind of stepping stone. It's a Band-Aid for women not being able to compete on the pro league level yet, for example. But I don't necessarily want to see more of those events, because I don't think more events is going to fix anything, because, for example, we just saw a couple weeks ago, $100,000 is on the line and only 3 teams form. So I don't think an online league is going to make a difference in terms of how many women decide to compete in Counter-Strike.
That's fair. That's fair. So if an online women's only league is definitely not the answer, or more of them is not the answer, what is the way forward? Can there be more, like, structurally, I mean, can there be something in place that advances, the cause of women's CSGO, if not online leagues?
Well, I hope it's actually people like my teammates in CLG Red that are engaging with the female Counter-Strike community to show them how to make a team, how do you get better, where do you enter these tournaments, help guide them, kind of be mentors. We have met a few females in the past where they were casual players, they were just our fans, they had met us, they got signed autographs, and now they're competing in some of the leagues that we compete in. So I think there's opportunity for the few females that do compete on a bigger level to serve as mentors to help them. Because again, there are a lot of females that play Counter-Strike now. Open up Twitch, and half of the Twitch Counter-Strike page are women, but they're not necessarily playing any type of matches. So I hope that we can serve kind of as mentors to them.
Could there be maybe something to do with prize pool or structured leagues? Because when you say there's a lot of women who are playing Counter-Strike on Twitch, for example, my mind instantly goes to, well, yeah, streaming is very lucrative, right? We've seen plenty of pros move over to that end of things because they're just like, oh, I can make money. I'll just stay home and make money.
Yeah, right. It's hard to look at the female scene. You see these 2 teams that are winning every single event or qualifying for every single event. And this is how I felt in 1.6. I didn't necessarily make an effort to try to form a women's team and beat, who were they at the time, SK Gaming or, GX3, because they already qualified for everything. And usually kind of there's only like 1 slot for a lot of events. I think that's probably the first thing I'd change. So for the few female events that there are, for a while, it was only 1 single North American slot. And that's why no one necessarily wanted to go to bat against SK or GX3. It wasn't until 2014 when I joined Team Karma, which has now become Team Dignitas, that there were 2 North American slots. And that was kind of the biggest qualifier you saw, because we thought, oh, well, finally there's a chance for someone to play alongside I think they were UB United at the time. It's a CLG goes back to UB United and all that. But I'd like to see more slots for the American teams. Usually the female tournaments are like 8 teams, maybe 5 Europe, 2 North America, 1 Asia, something like that. So I'd love to see more like 16-team tournaments. Maybe we'll see more female teams from North America. I'd hope, but we didn't for WESG, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to change.
I guess NACS is the same everywhere. It's just
yeah, it is. It's true.
You mentioned CLG Red a minute ago. They recently dropped their 2 main male rosters, the main one and the academy one, but they kept the female one, CLG Red. I wonder if you have any inkling. I know you don't work for CLG, you don't have any insider information, or maybe you do, but I was wondering if you could speak to what reason they might have for dropping the other 2 rosters but keeping CLG Red.
Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly sure why they did that. I was confused too, because CLG is, looking at the North American standings, they're essentially number 3, I think, on the recent, HLTV region rankings.
Okay.
They're number 3 behind Cloud9 and Liquid. So that was kind of a shocker to me. I'm sure they're certainly more expensive, and a lot of people are saying it's difficult to make money in Counter-Strike compared to something like League of Legends or Overwatch. You don't necessarily have this one overarching league where there's revenue share. Um, it's probably just maybe it's just an expense thing. CLG's in League now and Overwatch, and I'm sure they're spending a lot of money. So I'm guessing they maybe let go of some of the more expensive options. Beyond that, I'm not sure because I thought CLG is a fantastic, promising team.
Yeah, it seems and again, I don't have information, just hearsay, but it does seem like Madison Square Garden came in and they cleaned house a little bit. I know they replaced he was the CEO, Devin Nash, and it's now Nick Allen, I believe, at the time of recording. So yeah, I guess they probably just took a look at the books and they said, well, not today. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's gosh, esports, any team, it's not cheap anymore. Now that I work in the business, I'm like, oh my gosh, it takes a lot to kind of support teams and leagues and events. Even from a tournament organizer perspective, I can't believe how much some of these events cost that I go to. So it's becoming expensive thing to be involved in.
Totally makes sense. And speaking of expensive stuff to be involved in, a while back, I feel like Dignitas was going on a big sort of a press push, specifically for the female team. This is not like an official thing. I just noticed you guys were doing a lot of press. There was, photo shoots and interviews and that kind of stuff and videos coming out. Was that a concerted effort to promote the team? And was that successful?
Yeah, so, well, it's actually most of our teams kind of go through this boot camp. So, we are owned by the Philadelphia 76ers, and the female team happened to be the first team into the boot camp. So, we get it's really amazing. We get the same resources as the NBA team. So, working with a sports psychologist, physical therapist, nutritionist, chef, various coaches to work on communication. So we were the first team through this training session, and this was really one of a kind. There's a lot of other esports teams owned by NBA or NFL, but what's fascinating is that Team Dignitas works with the Philadelphia 76ers on a day-to-day basis, and we get all the same resources. So it's absolutely fantastic. So our female team was the first one to go through that boot camp, and then we were in Philadelphia, so we're really close to New York City. And there's a lot of great things, a lot of great stories we can tell about this training, this boot camp opportunity that we have as esports athletes. So a number of our other teams have gone through and will go through that kind of whole training session as well. So they're doing media tours as well. We just happened to be the first that did it.
Yeah, and apparently you guys get free tickets to basketball games, so I see on Twitter anyway.
Yeah, we got to go to the Staples Center when the Sixers played the Clippers, and I thought, we're going to be in a suite, suites are nice.
Yeah.
But this was like a club. We were in like a nightclub in the Staples Center that they rented out for us. Like a fully serviced bar, buffet. There's even a DJ there, watching the Sixers games, which is fantastic. And we've gotten to meet with the players several times now. We've even played Counter-Strike with them.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that was, we kind of wiped the floor with them. But they destroyed us when we played some NBA 2K, so they got us back.
Oh my God, that is awesome. Just to round out the previous topic, I wonder if, there's a young woman or, hey, an older woman listening to this podcast right now, and they're like, shit, I'm pretty good at CS. Maybe I should give this a try. What would you say to them? What advice would you have for them?
So I would start placing yourself in more competitive situations like ESEA or Face It. That's really how the players get known and picked up these days. Don't be afraid to start small. It's okay to start in open. Take a team from open, make it to the playoffs, and you're going to start getting noticed. Move your way up to IM, hopefully main. But don't be scared to start too low. It's better to be on a team than trying to fly solo. It's hard to get noticed that way. So, play on ESEA. Hit me up if you need an ESEA code. I've got a bazillion of them. Try it out. That's a great way to get started. And go to some local LAN tournaments too. That's a great way to network with other players. I'm fortunate now to be in SoCal, and there's a ton of events at eSports Arena, some even in NorCal. But if you can get to a local LAN event, that's a great way to start networking and meeting other players.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. That sort of grassroots approach to networking still works, which is good to hear, especially in this environment where we've got the 76ers, we've got the Houston Rockets, all these giant sports teams coming in, buying up all this real estate in esports. Speaking of which, okay, one more sort of message question I have is, if you have a message for the other end, for the people who've got the money, who've got the investment, who might be looking at Counter-Strike or who might be looking at female Counter-Strike specifically, what would you have to say to them?
Oh, I like this question. So, Counter-Strike, again, like I said, I worry because we don't have something like Valve adding structure and people to, well, Valve does, they have the major, but outside of the major, there isn't necessarily much. And I know coming from the NBA, NFL, that might be a little scary. However, I think Counter-Strike is one of the most fascinating esports because of that grassroots organic growth. Valve didn't do anything for years and years and years. And look at it. It's one of the most popular esports of all time because the fans, the players, they wanted tournaments to happen, so they made them happen. And that's the great thing about Counter-Strike. We can make it into whatever we want it to be as a community. And I think that's just so fascinating. It's different than any type of other professional sports. And it's also, as a viewer, I think it's one of the easiest to watch and understand. I like many, tune into the international for Dota, but beyond that, I don't watch it because I don't know what is going on, even though I'm a kind of a hardcore gamer. Counter-Strike at its core is such an easy game to understand, but you can also easily witness the skill level. When I watch Dota, I can't tell why one player is better than the next or why that player might be better than me. But in Counter-Strike, watch Fallen run around with an op, and the shots that he hits is just, you can tell how precise he is. And I just think that's such a fascinating sport. And I think it's a great, it correlates well with sports fans, traditional sports fans, because there is this really fascinating skill and strategic and communication component to it. You always have to be talking. You have to be studying your opponents. You can counter strat. There's all these fascinating components. I just get so excited about talking about it. But I think Counter-Strike is the best esport in the world. So there's that.
I couldn't agree more. I was literally about to say I truly think it is the best esport. I think it is the easiest to connect from or with. Excuse me. And if we just sort of manage to get past that whole terrorist thing, maybe we can make it to the League of Legends.
It's an issue. It's an issue. Yeah. I even told my mom growing up, she's like, why are you playing this game with killing people? Like, we don't see it like that. It could be paintballs. It could be apples shooting out the gun. I wouldn't necessarily think about that. It's all kind of the strategic component and working with your teammates to achieve something and being really quick and precise. That's the fascinating part to me.
Oh, something just popped into my head actually when we were talking about terrorists, and I do hate to keep harping on the woman angle because I'm sure you're sick of it by now, but I have been checking out Rainbow Six Siege a little bit recently, and it looks like a game that I might enjoy. I'm gonna try and get into it, see what it's all about. One thing that I thought was sick is that the operators, who are the main characters you play, they each have names and special skills. It's not like in CS where you have the economy. Some are male, some are female, and I guess I'm so used to games treating a female character model as sort of, I don't know, something super hypersexualized. I play too much Street Fighter maybe, that I was like, yo, the operators are sick. Like, they don't have midriff showing through their Kevlar. Like, they look fucking badass. Like, you hella want to play them. And can we get some female operators, some female CTs or Ts in Counter-Strike?
I guess that would be like, honestly, like to me, it doesn't make a difference,
Okay.
but it would be pretty badass too. Like, it would look just super sick, I think, to have a character. To me, it wouldn't even make a difference if I play or not, but
Yeah.
it would probably look pretty sick.
Yeah, like I know in CS, like we're not picking characters, right? We're just
Yeah.
it's sides, but I'd still like it kind of like got my brain going, like, oh yeah, like that's pretty sick.
Yeah, probably cool.
As we wind down a bit here, Heather, I just want to know if there's anything before we let you go that you wanted to talk about, like a topic that we didn't get to bring up, or even just final thoughts, or shout outs.
Oh gosh, no, I think we covered a range of stuff here, and I got to tell why Counter-Strike's the greatest esport. So that's important to me. But I guess a shout out would be, I appreciate the people that tuned in and listened to it. I think there's a lot of fascinating things that go on behind the scenes. You can have the greatest teams at an event, but there's got to be a way to show off their skill and tell their stories, and those stories are both in-game and out of game. You fall in love with these players a lot of times because you hear from them and you get some context, background, and to how they operate as people and as teams. So I appreciate people tuning in to listen to this. I'm not the best player in the world, but I think there are some great things that go on behind the scenes that make this a truly great esport.
Well said. And if people want to catch more of you, where can they do that? I know you stream on Twitch. Obviously, you're on all the social media.
I'm on all of them. Let's go. Twitch is twitch.tv/sapphiRe. I got the regular name there, which is great.
Damn.
On Twitter, I'm twitter.com/sapphiregg. So those are probably the two that you can reach me at.
Awesome. Well, Heather, thank you so much for making time for us. I really enjoyed the chat, and I hope you will join us again at some point.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Dan, do you want to say goodbye?
I was about to interrupt
Jeez.
you if I could. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciated the insight. Apologies for me being very quiet. It's one of my first times on the board, so I'm still getting used to everything here.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Right,
I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much, and hope to talk to you again soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Heather.
Bye.
Well, Dan, I think it's fair to say we'll be observing her career with a lot of interest.
Wow,
I'm done.
That
Just
pun was.
put a pin in it. I'm
that
done.
was rough.
I really
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it was terrible. I have no dignity toss. I don't know. I legitimately though I really enjoyed that talk we just had.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely
sapphiRe.
it was absolutely fascinating. I think that
The observer thing is so fascinating.
that's always one thing, like the invisible hand kind of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't talk about somebody who isn't spoken about but is so integral to the experience is absolutely fascinating, and I think that there is there was a little bit of paralleling with sort of her conversation about with the part of the conversation that was about female CS:GO, and I think that there is something to be said about sort of a scene that is there and integral and important but isn't seen as much, and it's funny how those two things kind of thematically connect.
That's
but
interesting.
that might just be the English masters in me talking.
Yeah, it might be, but it's good. I like that. It's got me thinking a little deeper about it.
That's what I'm here for, is to help you think. I'm also here to get very, very sweaty in this hot room, Colin, so why don't you play us out?
It's super hot in here. You can't tell on camera. I should not have worn this hoodie. I fucked up. I legitimately fucked up. And with that being said, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Score Esports podcast. Don't forget, you can check us out. We're on iTunes. We're on the Score Esports app. We're on the Score Esports YouTube. We're on the Twitter. We're on all the things. So hit us up and tell us who you want to see on the show. For Daniel Rosen, for this empty chair, I am Colin McNeil, saying until next time, GG.
Bye.